So good evening, everybody. Welcome to our Anamkara meditation program. With all my heart, with all my love, I welcome you to our program this evening. So glad you're joining us. And I thought this evening I would do a couple of readings of stories. And, one of my favorite collections of Tolstoy's works, and Tolstoy, everybody knows, a famous Russian writer, but he was also quite a mystic and profoundly religious and his Christian ideals. And so he drew on both his own inspirations in many of his stories, but he also drew on tales from, folk tales from Russia and tales from other parts of the country. So I thought I'd read a couple of those this evening just for our contemplation. It's getting together in satsang is a time where we get together and celebrate really the living presence of the divine and all the ways it reveals itself. And some of Tolstoy's work helps to shine light on some of those revelations. But we gather together in this kind of context so that we can really dive more deeply into that inner experience, because it's the living presence of the divine within each and every one of us that we want to know, we want to revel in, and be able to access anytime, any place. And, all the things that are going on in the world, that go on in our lives, that go on in our relationships, they often are clouding our vision and getting in the way of us experiencing the fullness of that divine presence, that loving presence, that compassionate presence, that patient presence that's with us moment by moment, every moment of every day. But our mind keeps going and attending to things that it considers most important and sets aside that divine presence and sets it aside often for so long we almost forget where it is or how it can be found or how can we come back to it. And so we gather in satsang, keeping the company of the truth, literally what it means, the highest truth, the truth that you are the divine, and that's the truth of who you are at all times in all places. So we gather together to both do practices, to enjoy the company of one another, and bring that consciousness. Because even though we seem to be in different places in the country or even in the world, the truth is we're all in this unified field of consciousness. That is the divine. There is no separation. There is no difference. The mind, identified with a limited body, a limited identity, a limited role, that seems cut off, but the underlying foundation of it all, that's one. That's unity. That's why all the mystics of all the great traditions come home to that one truth. We are the divine. There is no other. So we take refuge in that so that we are then empowered and strengthened to walk that loving compassion, kindness, and patience into our everyday lives, to live it ourselves, to take refuge in ourselves, to be nurtured and buoyed by that ourselves. So as part of that, contemplation is a practice. And so these couple of stories from Tolstoy, think of it as that kind of contemplation, just a way to enjoy sitting back and relaxing and just hearing what these stories and what they invoke for you. Now, he wrote these back in around 1903, so, 120 plus years ago. And this first one that is titled Work, Death, and Sickness, a Legend. He's drawing on what he calls a legend from South American Indians. And so he collected stories from around the world and used them for inspiration and retold them often. So here's that story. God, say they, at first made men so that they had no need to work. They needed neither houses, nor clothes, nor food, and they all lived till they were 100 and didn't know what illness was. When, after some time, God looked to see how people were living, he saw that instead of being happy in their life, they had quarreled with one another, and each caring for himself had brought matters to such a pass that far from enjoying life, they cursed it. Then God said to himself, This comes from their living separately, each for himself. And to change the state of things, God so arranged matters that it became impossible for people to live without working. To avoid suffering from cold and hunger, they were now obliged to build dwellings and to dig the ground and to grow and gather fruits and grain. Work will bring them together, thought God. They cannot make their tools, prepare and transport their timber, build their houses, sow and gather their harvests, spin and weave and make their clothes, each one alone by himself. It will make them understand that the more heartily they work together, the more they will have and the better they will live, and this will unite them. Well, time passed on, and God came to see how men were living and whether they were now happy. But he found them living worse than before. They worked together, they could not help but doing that, but not all together, being broken up into little groups, and each group tried to snatch work from other groups, and they hindered one another, wasting time and strength in their struggles, so that things went ill with them all. Well, having seen that this too was not well, God decided so as to arrange things that man should not know the time of his death, but might die at any moment. And he announced this to them. Knowing that each of them may die at any moment, thought God, they will not, by grasping at gains that they may last so short a time, spoil the hours of life allotted to them. Oh, but it turned out otherwise. When God returned to see how people were living, he saw that their life was as bad as ever. Those who were strongest, availing themselves of the fact that men might die at any time, subdued those who were weaker, killing some and threatening others with death. And it came about that the strongest of their descendants did no work and suffered from the weariness of idleness, while those who were weaker and had to work beyond their strength and suffered from the lack of rest. Each set of men feared and hated the other, and the life of man became yet more unhappy. Having seen all this, God, to mend matters, decided to make use of one last means. He sent all kinds of sickness among men. God thought that when all men were exposed to sickness, they would understand that those who were well should have pity on those who were sick and should help them, and that when they themselves fall ill, those who are well might in turn help them. And again God went away, but when he came back to see how men lived now that they were subject to sickness, he saw that their life was worse even than before. The very sickness that in God's purpose should have united them had divided them more than ever. Those men who were strong enough to make others work forced them also to wait on them in times of sickness. But they did not, in their turn, look after those who were ill, and those who were forced to work for others and to look after them when sick were so worn out with work that they had no time to look after their own sick, but left them without attendance. That the sight of sick folk might not disturb the pleasures of the wealthy, houses were arranged in which those poor people suffered and died, far from those whose sympathy might have cheered them, and in the arms of hired people who nursed them without compassion or even with disgust. Moreover, people considered many of the illnesses and infections, and fearing to catch them, not only avoided the sick, but even separated themselves from those who attended the sick. Then God said to himself, if even this means will not bring men to understand wherein their happiness lies, let them be taught by suffering. And God left men to themselves. And left to themselves, men lived long before they understood that they all ought to and might be happy. Only in the very latest times have a few of them begun to understand that work ought not to be a bugbear to some and like a galley of slavery for others, but should be a common and happy occupation, uniting all men. They have begun to understand that with death constantly threatening each of us, the only reasonable business of every man is to spend the years, months, and hours and minutes allotted them in unity, in love. They began to understand that sickness, far from dividing men, should, on the contrary, give opportunity for loving union with one another. A great story to contemplate as he shines a light on what might have been divisive that could also be unifying. So much has to do with our attitude. What's our state of mind? What's our state of being? What do we bring to the moment? Yes? Now in the second story, this is a story called 3 Questions. Again, a great kind of contemplation. It once occurred to a certain king that if he always knew the right time to begin everything, if he knew who were the right people to listen to and to whom to avoid, and above all, if he always knew what was the most important thing to do, he would never fail in anything he might undertake. And this thought having occurred to him, he had it proclaimed throughout his kingdom that he would give a great reward to anyone who would teach him what was the right time for every action, and who were the most necessary people, and how he might know what was the most important thing to do. Well, learned men came to the king, but they all answered his questions differently. In reply to the first question, some said that to know the right time for every action, one must draw up in advance a table of the days, the months, the years, and must live strictly in accordance to it. Only thus, they said, could everything be done in its proper time. Others declared that it was impossible to decide beforehand the right time for every action, but that not letting oneself be absorbed in idle pastimes, one should attend to all that was going on and then do what was most needful. Others again said that however attentive the king might be to what is going on, it was impossible for one man to decide correctly the right time for every action, but there should be a council of wise men who would help him to fix the proper time for everything. But then again, others said there were some things which could not wait to be laid before a council, but about which one had to at once decide whether to undertake them or not. But in order to decide that, one must know beforehand what was going to happen. Well, it's only magicians who know that, and therefore, they said, in order to know the right time for every action, one must consult magicians. Well, equally various were the answers to the second question. Some said the people from the king most needed were the counselors. Others said the most important people were the priests. Others, the doctors, while some said warriors were the most necessary. To the third question, as to what was most important occupation, some people replied that the most important thing in the world was science. Others said it was skill at warfare. Others again said that it was religious worship. All the answers being different, the king agreed with none of them, and gave the reward to none. But still, wishing to find the right answers to his questions, he decided to consult a hermit, widely known for his wisdom. Now the hermit lived in a wood which he never quitted, and he received none but common folk. So the king put on simple clothes, and before reaching the hermit's cell, dismounted from his horse, and leaving his bodyguard behind, went on alone. And when the king approached, the hermit was digging the ground in front of his hut. Seeing the king, he greeted him and went on digging. The hermit was frail and weak, and each time he struck the spade into the ground and turned a little earth, he breathed heavily. The king went up to him and said, "I have come to you, wise hermit, to ask you to answer 3 questions. How can I learn to do the right thing at the right time? Who are the people I most need, and to whom should I therefore pay more attention than to the rest? And what affairs are the most important and need my first attention?" The hermit listened to the king, but answered nothing. He just spat on the ground and recommenced digging. "You are tired," said the king. "Let me take the spade and work a while." "Thanks," said the hermit, and giving the spade to the king, he sat down on the ground. When he had dug 2 of the beds, the king stopped and repeated his questions. The hermit again gave no answer, but rose, stretched out his hand for the spade, and said, "Now rest a while, and let me work a bit." But the king did not give him the spade. He continued to dig. An hour passed, then another. The sun began to sink behind the trees, and the king at last stuck the spade into the ground and said, "I came to you, wise man, for an answer to my questions. If you can give me none, tell me so, and I will return home." "Oh, here comes someone running," said the hermit. "Let us see who it is." The king turned around and saw a bearded man running out of the woods. The man held his hands pressed against his stomach, and blood was flowing from under them. When he reached the king, he fell fainting on the ground, moaning feebly. The king and the hermit unfastened the man's clothing, and there was a large wound in his stomach. The king washed it as best he could and bandaged it with a handkerchief and with a towel that the hermit had, but the blood would not stop flowing. And the king again and again removed the bandage, soaked with warm blood, washed it, cleansed it, and rebandaged the wound. When at last the blood ceased flowing, the man revived and asked for something to drink. The king brought fresh water and gave it to him. Meanwhile the sun had set and had become cool. So the king and the hermit carried the wounded man into the hut and laid him on the bed. Lying on the bed, the man closed his eyes and was quiet. The king was so tired with his walking and his work that he had done that he crouched down on the threshold and soon fell asleep, so soundly that he slept all through the short summer night. When he awoke in the morning, it was long before he could remember where he was, or who was the strange bearded man lying on a bed, gazing intently at him with shining eyes. "Forgive me," said the bearded man in a weak voice when he saw the king was awake and looking at him. "Well, I do not know you and have nothing to forgive you for," said the king. "Oh, you do not know me, but I know you. I am that enemy of yours who swore to revenge himself on you because you executed his brother and seized his property. I knew you had gone alone to see the hermit, and I resolved to kill you on your way back. But the day passed, and you did not return. So I came out from my ambush to find you, and I came upon your bodyguard, and they recognized me and wounded me. I escaped from them, but should have bled to death had you not dressed my wound. I wished to kill you. You have saved my life. Now, if I live, and if you wish, I will serve you as your most faithful servant, and will bid my sons to do the same. Please forgive me. Well, the king was very glad to have made peace with his enemy so easily, and so to have gained him for a friend. And he not only forgave him, but he said he would send his servants and his own physician to attend him, and promised to restore his property. Having taken leave of the wounded man, the king went out onto the porch and looked for the hermit. Before going away, he wished once more to beg an answer to the questions he had put. The hermit was outside on his knees, sowing seeds in the beds that had been dug the day before. The king approached him and said, "For the last time, I pray you to answer my questions, wise man." "Well, you have already been answered," said the hermit, still crouching on his thin legs, looking up at the king, who stood before him. "How answered? What do you mean?" said the king. "Well, do you not see?" replied the hermit. "If you had not pitied my weakness yesterday, and had not dug these beds for me, but had gone your way, that man would have attacked you, and you would have repented of not having stayed with me. So the most important time was when you were digging in the beds, and I was the most important man. And to do me good was your most important business. Afterwards, when that man ran to us, the most important time was when you were attending to him. For if you had not bound up his wounds, he would have died without having made peace with you. So he was the most important man. What you did for him was your most important business. Remember then, there is only one time that is important: now. It is the most important time because it's the only time when we have any power. The most necessary man is he with whom you are. For no man, whether he will ever have dealings with anyone else, and the most important affair to us is to do him good, because for that purpose alone was man sent into this life. Here and now. To bring compassion, to bring kindness to whoever's there in need. This is what we're called to. Such a profound teaching. To be in this moment, to be present. This is from Kali's Bazaar, penned by Kalidas. Now. The end is now. The beginning is now. Bring all your attention to this point. All your attention. Now. My dear one, everyone enjoys being loved. All beings delight in love coursing through them. All want to be happy. All want to enjoy good health and long life. All are loving sons and daughters rising from the same source. Can you harm a son or daughter without piercing the mother and father? In this moment, do you choose to love all sons and daughters? Are you cultivating the sweet fruit of compassion and kindness for every being? This sublime nectar can be yours right now. Enough of bitterness, anger, and revenge. What has cultivating these brought to anyone but agony, to mothers and fathers, sons and daughters? Even if it is just for your own pleasure, choose the boundless joy of living with compassion and kindness for all. Choose. Choose now. Choose now. Each moment is a choice point. Each moment, what are we choosing? All the practices are to make us conscious, aware of the old patterns, conditioned patterns of mind that seem to leave us with no choice because of the automaticity of the reactivity, anger, irritability, disdain, whatever's coming up. So we have to become conscious, have to own consciousness. Live in that state of consciousness where freedom is, and it's exercised in this moment. And this moment, and this moment. We can only exercise our freedom. We can only know our freedom. We can only express our freedom in the moment, this moment, by our choices. What are we choosing? What are we choosing of all the things arising in consciousness? This magnificent field of consciousness we're giving access to. Thoughts arising, feelings arising, sensations arising, memories arising, all kinds of things arising. We have to have the discernment, the discrimination, the strength, the steadiness of wisdom to choose what reflects our highest nature, what's true to our highest self, what's true to the heart of the divine, the presence within each and every one of us. This is what we're called to do. Especially at this critical time in this world, where we see such divisiveness, such anger, so much hate, so much domination, exploitation, control. People just seeking to exploit others. Just like the ancient stories that Tolstoy was referencing. This is not new, but we have to wake up. And that is occurring more and more. More important, people saying, wait a minute, we don't want this. We want to be able to choose love. We want to be able to choose compassion, to choose kindness, to choose generosity. When we choose those, we feel the integrity of that. We feel aligned with our highest self. We feel the fullness of that. Because that fullness is divine fullness. It's inexhaustible fullness. That's what we keep coming home to. That's what the practices empower us to know moment by moment, here and now, and then empower us to walk it into our lives, our relationships, our work, our transactions with people, whether they're in a grocery store or on the highway or whatever it might be. Everything reflects our state. Our state? Oh, that reflects what our choices are. What are we choosing to dwell in? Dwell in the truth. Dwell in the light of your divine nature. Come home to that over and over. Then we dwell in the highest. Then we walk the highest into the world. Then we give that to all until our last breath. Because the highest calling of a human birth is to know the infinite, to know the divine as all that is, our own self, and all beings, all creation. And to serve the divine, moment by moment, to know and to serve. That's the great gift of a human birth, that we can revel in that, know that, delight in that. That's what gives us the strength to walk through the fires of the world, the fires that are really reflective of people's sad state of ignorance and disconnect from their own divine nature. So we look at them with great compassion for the suffering that they're flailing about, inflicting on others. There's almost nothing compared to the suffering they themselves are living in. All suffering due to ignorance. So we want to cut through with wisdom, compassion, kindness, grace, and carrying that knowing that all is divine, that we're all united in that. We carry that into the world. So to dive more deeply into that, now we're going to be chanting the great mantra, the Maha Mantra, Om Namah Shivaya. And it means I bow to the auspicious one, the auspicious one, the divine, known by every tradition. I bow to the divine within. And in the tradition, we also recognize and practice that I am that. I am that divine. Not just a little ego mind. Oh, no. My heart essence, my highest self is that divine. And so are all beings. We're all united in that one. So we're chanting with this, also this awareness. We are united by our divinity. That's what is unbreakable. That's the unbreakable union of all. We're grounded in the infinite, the divine, the one, the auspicious one. Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. So we come home to that. So we'll chant for a few minutes and then just sit in the stillness. And if the mind moves, just keep bringing it back. So the silent repetition of Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. Might be fast, it might be slow, it might be with the breath, it might be just independent. But just keep absorbing awareness in that until the mantra, as it draws your mind into source, it draws it into stillness. A stillness that dissolves even the sound forms and the thought forms of mantra. To all there is this throb of awareness, of being, all-encompassing being, nothing and no one left out, suffused with love. That divine embrace, rest in that. That's your home. Shri Mata Kali Mahadevi Ki Jai. Om Namah Shivaya. And just resting in that stillness, resting in awareness. I am the boundless, the infinite, the all-embracing, loving compassion. I bow to that one. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Kalima. Rest in the truth, who you are. Kali Mahadevi Ki Jai. And we end with this prayer. May all our practices truly benefit everyone, and may all beings know complete freedom from suffering. Namaste. That stillness, that spaciousness, the divine embrace, remind us of our freedom to choose. We're often so oppressed by the reactive mind, so pressured. Seems like there's no choice in the moment. So by practicing meditation, by repeating mantra throughout the day, by coming home to the truth of who we are moment by moment, we expand that range of choices. We expand our capacity to be loving and kind, compassionate and present, empowered, strengthened by the truth of who we are, by walking illumined by that light of the self, the light of the divine within, that we can see our way forward with greater love, greater compassion, greater strength, greater perseverance, to be true to the highest in every moment, in all beings, all creation. That's what we're called on. That's what we have the capacity to know and walk into the world. So thank you with all my heart. Thank you for being ones doing that work, the profound work, the secret work of being knowers, of carrying that wisdom that rises from the source within, from your own heart, carrying it into the world, moment by moment. Thank you. Bless you for all that you do. And thank you for coming this evening, bringing the fullness of your divine presence. Thank you for the many ways you support Anam Cara and our work to just simply make these high teachings and practices available to all. Thank you for your donations. Support us being able to do that. And I look forward to seeing you again in 2 weeks.